Times across to the capital city once more. President Ramaphosa also expected later today to address the opening session of the 2022 Heads of Mission Conference in Pretoria. And this morning's gathering taking place at the DIRCO headquarters in the capital city. Khayelihle Khumalo is there. And of course, he was speaking to the Minister of International Relations earlier on, Dr. Naledi Pandor. But let's find out what he has in store for us. Promised to speak to some of the diplomats that are there, Kaya, so let me hand it to you.
Well, that's right, Sakina. Quite a very interesting day here at the OR Tambo building. Of course, a number of senior diplomats from South Africa deployed in so many missions across the world. They are here in a matter of an hour or so. That's when, of course, President Ramaphosa will take to the podium and really just give them a sense in terms of South Africa's priorities. So, Sakina, certainly quite a number of diplomats that are here, and joining us now is South Africa's diplomat right in New York, representing South Africa, the UN. That's, of course, Ambassador Joini. So, Ambassador, thank you so much indeed for joining us here on SABC News. I suppose the very first question is, it's been very busy for you. So many motions tabled, and of course the issue around the conflict, Russia and Ukraine. But of course there are other things as well that you are looking at as well, where you're chairing, looking at the issues of the empowerment of women, the issue of very critical matters, in fact. So, Ambassador, give us a sense of how important is your job, as South Africa is a very strong player on multilateral affairs.
Thank you very much, Khayelihle, and good morning to you. Good morning to Deputy Ministers, Excellencies, DG, but also a very good morning to your listeners. It's good to be home. Now, coming to the role that I play, the work that I do at the UN, is an important one for South Africa. And I think our constitution way back called for South Africa to be a player, to be united and a democratic and take its place in the community of nations at the UN. And that's precisely what we are doing. Whether it's in New York, in Geneva, in Vienna, we continue to do precisely that. The UN is an organization that sets the global agenda. It sets the norms and standards of global governance. And certainly we want to be in that space. We want our voice to be heard, to be clear in that space. But it's also in that space where we want to promote our national interest. It's in that space where we want to infuse our values as they are very clearly laid out in our constitution, the foundational values in our constitution. It is in this space where member states come together and try and resolve and solve global problems. And as we do that, as we solve global problems, we certainly want South Africans' point of view to be in there. We want to influence that agenda. We want to set that agenda, and we want to contribute in a meaningful way towards solving of global issues that we might be addressing, including conflicts that we see, including development, the sustainable development goals that we're dealing with. We want South Africa's voice to be in there as well. Yeah.
And for the longest time, Ambassador, Pretoria has been calling for the transformation of the UN Security Council. You do have a Zululand consensus calling for Africa to be well represented, as opposed to having from time to time non-permanent seats. How's that conversation going?
That conversation continues. South Africa's point of view is very clear that the reform of the Security Council is long overdue. When the Security Council was created many, many years ago, you did not have the United Nations that you have today with the membership that it currently has. And it cannot continue in the manner that it is. So you need the voice of Africa, of the continent, to be heard. You need the voice of other developing countries, of small island states, to be heard. And it certainly has to reform. So the negotiations around that are going. And South Africa is calling for those negotiations to begin to be text-based. or else we continue going to the same positions over and over again, articulating a Zulu consensus. But we really now need to move and say, where is consensus? Where is convergence? Where are we not seeing issues the same way, so that we can zero in there and address those gaps? And you can only do that once you have a text in front of you. So South Africa is calling for text-based negotiations so that we can move and shift the needle and get to a point where we see how we... And in fact, the conflict that is currently going on is actually demonstrating how much we need a reformed Security Council.
Ambassador, how has it been? Because you have those who are saying if you're neutral, essentially you do side with an aggressor, so you have to take a side, so to speak. So how's it been for you? Because you're right at the forefront, and South Africa is trying to explain its position, why it's not aligning itself with a certain position, so to speak, but really emphasizing the issue of the dialogue as opposed to other things, calling for cessation of hostilities. But how has that experience been like?
It's been an interesting experience. Look, there is strong mobilizing that is going on in New York. But what centers one to be able to engage with a very clear-minded and clear position is that you know our own experience as South Africa, that we are a product of negotiations, we are a product of mediation. So you're talking from your country's experience, and it's a lived experience, and nobody can argue with that. And the values that we believe in as South Africa. So it's not neutral. It's very clear what it is calling for, and what it is calling for is what this country has experienced. And therefore, and the other thing, the New York space is one where we all know and we all agree that this is my position, or the country's position, in fact, it's South Africa's position on this, and tomorrow we will focus on other things because the agenda is huge, and we will collaborate and cooperate on other issues as well.
All right, so Ambassador, at this point in time, I'm going to excuse you because obviously it's a plethora of issues that we are looking at, and quite a number of ambassadors that we're trying to speak to. At this point in time, we're going to speak to South Africa's ambassador in Ukraine, a country that is going through a conflict. So Ambassador, once again, thank you so much indeed for your time. So I'm going to call now Ambassador Groenewald just to get his thoughts and his reflections. It hasn't been quite a very easy posting that you've had, Ambassador. So thank you so much indeed for your time, Ambassador. Maybe first and foremost, as South Africa's ambassador in Ukraine, you were right at the battlefield at some point. How was that experience?
If I had to say, good morning, Kaya. Good morning to the Minister, Deputy Ministers, DG, and all the excellencies. It's a much easier place to do an interview than the previous interviews that we have done. It's unnerving, it's surprising, it is an experience that is unimaginable in terms of all the sensory indications that are there that you're not supposed to experience. One of the things that surprised me is the impact of the sirens, for example. Every time that the sirens went off, it's Second World War sirens. So we are somehow, we've heard it on TV, in movies and so on, but to live it is a tough place. And then, of course, living through an area during a time that it's not just the war situation, it's snipers in the street. It is prisoners that have been released during the war situation that are also on the streets. It's people looking to benefit from a situation in the street. And then, of course, in the evacuation situation, you are going through, at one stage, we went through about every 3 kilometers, we went through a military, what they call the serpent roads, the blockades. And every one of them are different from the previous one. And so you remain, and we drove for 36 hours non-stop. Every 3 kilometers through a military block is, yeah.
And obviously in the midst of all of that, you're ducking, you're diving, but you must make sure that South Africans who are in Ukraine, they do get consular services, they are evacuated. Surely that's quite a very enormous task.
It is a big responsibility because despite all the policy issues that we have to do, the fact Ambassador Joini spoke about what is happening at the UN, we're talking about our bilateral relations between our two governments, we also have a responsibility towards our people. In many of the cases, the people that we are talking about are young students that have never been outside of South Africa. They don't speak the language. They live in a country they've never experienced something like this. And so to speak to them, to keep them calm, and most of all, I think the obligation is to set an example for them as well. Every morning I got a telephone call to ask, are you still in Kiev? And just that, yes, I'm there, was a confidence building measure for the students especially. And if you look at the students that came out last, they were in those cities that are right on the border of Russia. And those are the cities that are, until today, are still under attack. And so the last two that came out they had to go through two lines of armies. And so it's not that you just negotiate with one. It's a moving arena all the time.
Ambassador, is your building still intact? Do you still hope one day to go back to Kyiv and see normality and see life happening like it used to be?
We have to go back, and we will go back as soon as we can, because it's important for the South African flag to be there. We cannot have all these discussions at very high levels and not be there. We have to be there. We have to be seen to be a country that are in the game, as they say. And so for that, I think it's important to go back. There's a difference between being brave and being stupid. We hopefully are not the latter. And so what we will do, we will keep on assessing. We will look at what is good for South Africa and good for what we're supposed to do, but we will also look at our contribution for the region. And it's important that we make that contribution because we bring a unique voice to that conflict. And I think it's important that South Africa is afforded the opportunity then to voice that opinion.
And just before I let you go, Ambassador, obviously there's a bit of consternation with the ramifications of the conflict. We're seeing already the fuel price skyrocketing, among other products. As South Africa, what can we do perhaps to cushion the consumers, to protect the South Africans who are now feeling the pinch of the war?
I think you've heard Minister earlier spoke about the economic diplomacy outreach and what we're supposed to do and national interest. That is exactly the summary for all of those issues. We need to look at how the world, when we are talking about changing the UN, it's not just the UN that needs changing, it's the world financial system that needs changing. It is the power structures that are there that needs changing. We need to look at an overall situation, and hopefully this time Africa will be part of the discussions around that, so that when we change the world, the benefits go equally to everybody. And I think that is the discussions that we are in now. Those are the discussions when we're talking about some of the costs that are passed on to the consumers. We need to address that, and those are issues at high level, but it's also on a level on a personal level. And I think that is what conflict teaches you. Everything is personal. And I think we are very well aware of that as this department, but also as the people sitting here.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much indeed for that. So, of course, that is South Africa's ambassador in Ukraine, Mr. Groenewald. Of course, a lot of issues to look into as South Africa is repositioning itself and making sure that its missions across the world as well are beefed up in terms of how they really practice diplomacy in this very ever-evolving space.